It's just nice to know that.
If anybody would like a copy of the discourse, there you go. Papers, pen.
Oh, I'll share it with you. It's big.
Yeah. You can take a little walk and then come for class, and take another walk and then pick up your kids. All right, let's get started. So first of all, I'd like to welcome all the new faces. The deal with this class is we are studying a discourse, but the idea is that every lesson is a standalone. There's always unique content in each lesson. I want to mention also that after the holidays, we have a new course starting, the Kabbalah of Meaning. It's a 6-week course offered Tuesday evenings and Wednesday day, and everybody's welcome to come join us for that. So we're going to start a new chapter today, chapter 4, which is on page 28. But before we do that, I want to just touch on one point of what we've been discussing, which is the idea that our relationship with God is especially the higher relationship. So there's a relationship that we have with God that's more of a personal relationship, where God takes the individual into consideration, creation, all this specifics of existence are a direct manifestation of God, and that's where we have a personal relationship. Then there's a higher dimension of the divine relationship, which is not readily accessible. And in order to so to speak, download that dimension of the relationship, that comes through these channels known as the mitzvot, the commandments, and Torah study. Basically, God says, if you want to connect with my essence, this is the program. Fulfill my commandments, study my Torah, and you can download these dimensions. And then the discourse discussed the idea that we activate that part of us to motivate us through prayer, that in prayer we contemplate God's presence in the world around us. We look at, if you follow the order of prayer, we see praise of God as he's found within nature. We contemplate the wondrous reality around us, and then we move into the physical cosmos and the spiritual cosmos, all in our consciousness, and that motivates us to want to strive for something higher and something bigger than ourselves. He referenced the notion of the land of Israel, which is known as the land flowing with milk and honey. I want to just take 2 minutes to repeat what he shared, and actually an insight that I heard Thursday night, which I found to be fascinating. So why is Israel called the land flowing with milk and honey? So in general, Israel is a place, you might say, that's closer to God, right? In Hebrew, the word Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, means it's a land that wishes to do the will of the Creator. So there are plenty of commandments that we can fill in the diaspora, but in Israel, everything is connected to a mitzvah. There's the land itself, the agriculture, every element of it. We just learned in yesterday's Torah portion the idea of the first fruit, but there's the tithes that need to be given. There's the parts of the field that we leave for the poor. There's the sacrifices that are offered in Israel. There are many, many commandments that are exclusive to the land of Israel. So Israel is, so to speak, more aligned and more spiritually aligned and more spiritually available for us to be able to serve God. But there's a spiritual meaning behind this idea of a land flowing with milk and honey. So let's see if my prompt works, right? Everybody uses AI. Let me see if my prompt works. What is, when I say milk, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Cow. Okay, what's the second thing that comes to mind? Thank you, of course. So mother's milk, right? So, but by the way, good morning. They both serve a similar function, which is, and if you're a vegan or something, we can debate this later, but milk causes growth. Milk is critical to growth. And it's interesting, the greatest, I've got two baby grandsons that were born in the last 4 or 5 months. And my daughter started, there's this shtick on Instagram where every month you take a picture, the parents take a picture with the baby, and you watch the baby grow, right? You can't do that from 8 years old to 9 years old to 10 years old. You could, but the shift is not that dramatic. But a baby in the first 18 months of life grows so significantly from their birth weight, from their birth size, and it's almost entirely grown by mother's milk. So milk is this unbelievable tool that causes growth. In the human experience, the parallel to growth in our inner world is emotions, right? Intellect also grows, it evolves, but emotions have the most significant development. So spiritually, the idea of the land of Israel, or its manifestation through the fulfillment of God's commandments, is the idea that we grow emotionally in our anchoring, in our relationship with God, and so on and so forth. So that's milk. What is honey? So honey represents pleasure. Okay? So again, there are four fundamental dimensions to the human condition: emotion, intellect, will, and pleasure. And actually, that's from the bottom up. In other words, emotion is the most base. Intellect is really where the human experience comes in. And then we have a person's will. So where does emotions generally live? Don't be shy. What part of your body does emotions live in? In the heart. Okay? That's where we experience it. Where does intellect live? In the head. Where does will live? Both and everywhere else, right? So our foot has a will, our hand has a will, our heart, our head's will lives throughout the body, which itself is an indication that it's of a higher dimension. Pleasure is even higher than will. Pleasure also lives everywhere in the body. It's the highest dimension of the human experience. Now, pleasure is good in general, but we're not talking about simply indulgent pleasure. We're talking about a higher dimension of pleasure. So listen to this. Going back to the baby. When the baby is born, the baby lacks everything. You ever see a newborn baby? It's the most helpless creature in the world. Even animal babies are capable. They have tools. You watch the little calf being born, and it stretches its legs and it starts walking. A baby needs everything. God lacks nothing. When we lack something, think about any kind of pleasure that we experience, any kind of pleasure. It's always fulfilling a lack. It could be a base need. You're hungry, you need food, and you eat the most basic food, you get pleasure from that. To indulgent pleasure, there's a need that we're trying to fill even when we're engaged in indulgent pleasure. Sometimes it's a very unhealthy pursuit because the need is not a healthy need, but that's the reality. We pursue the pleasures because it serves a need for us. So that's okay, but there's a higher pleasure, and that's the divine pleasure. And divine pleasure means when we are so okay with our connection to God, we get pleasure in everything. Everything. Because God lacks nothing, and when we're connected to that, we're okay. And we have pleasure in whatever it is that we're doing or not doing, by the way. Right? We live in a time where everybody needs to, where we have to be productive in order to find value within ourselves. But the truth is that we are okay even if we do nothing. I listened to a great class years ago, a fascinating talk from the Rebbe about women are compared in Kabbalah to the moon. And not to get into a whole sociological analysis, but women oftentimes, even though psychologically, spiritually, men have a greater need to prove themselves, women can be very hard on themselves in finding value in their productivity. So this woman was giving the class about explaining the function of the moon is to be a recipient, right? So you have a pregnant woman who's laying on the couch and she feels like, what am I doing? Like, I need to be productive. And this woman that was teaching the class, she said, you're doing the most important thing in the world. And how do you do the most important thing in the world? By doing nothing. Just by being, you are doing the most important thing in the world. Okay, now you can argue, okay, she is gestating a child, but the fact is that God put each of us on this earth, and yes, we have to be productive, but our value comes from the fact that God found us worthy enough to place on this earth. So we are of value, we are okay just by being. But the only way we can recognize that is if we get in touch with the true essence of who we are. And who's the true essence of who we are? That's the divinity, that's the godliness that's within each of us. So the more we get in touch with that essential part of who we are, the more we get pleasure from just being. So this is the second dimension of the land of Israel. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. Milk because it grows our emotional characteristics in our relationship with God, and honey because the greatest pleasure comes from being connected to God, and the accessibility for that is in the land of Israel more so than it is in the diaspora. But nonetheless, it's ultimately about our relationship with God that ultimately affords us that opportunity to be connected on that essential level. All that makes sense? Interesting? Any questions? Yes.
Why does God give us all these very specific, it seems, I don't know, like the laws on keeping kosher, like, and doing all these things that he is going to follow it at strictness, but like you're not just being.
Yeah, totally. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to answer you in a little bit of a roundabout way, okay? So there's a physical world, and there's the inner dimension of existence, which is spiritual. God didn't place us in heaven. He placed us in a physical earth. Why? Because the greatest connection to God actually takes place in the place where God is most concealed. When you go to a light show, you experience all the drama and the fanfare of the light show. But there are places where there's light that is so powerful that you can't see it. So God's presence in heaven is a given. It's obvious. The angels experience it. The souls experience it. On this earth, God's presence is concealed. And yet the Mishnah tells us, our tradition tells us, that greater is one moment of good deeds in this world than all of the world to come. Why? Because when your soul is out of the body, you can't do any of those commandments. You can't connect with God. In other words, a relationship lives in one dimension on an essential level. We're connected, but the relationship also lives in the external dimension, in the doing. And you can't have one without the other. You can't do if you're not connected. It's meaningless. But if all you are is connected, then the relationship has no texture to it. Even if it's true, right? Think about a marriage, right? The essential bond is what creates that connection to each other, but the relationship doesn't live just in the essential bond. It lives in the manifestation of it. So there are two ways to approach our engagement in the physical world. And I'm not talking about just commandments. I'm talking about most of our life, which is not about a mitzvah, right? Most of our life is just engaged in the mundane world. We go to work, we eat, we sleep, we take care of our hygiene. None of that is a mitzvah per se. All of that is just physical engagement. And I can do all of that in the service of the self. It can be a very selfish endeavor. Not selfish like narcissistic. Just the human condition is preoccupied with self. So I can do all of that in my own interest. I'm eating because I'm hungry. I'm eating because I'm sleeping because I'm tired. I don't want to be tired. I don't want to be hungry. I'm looking to fill those needs. Or I can engage with the physical world because everything I'm doing is an opportunity to connect with God as he is manifest in the physical world. So both are true. On the one hand, we need to know that we are okay, that we are good, because who am I at my core? I am a part of God. Once I truly know that, then I can show up in any element of life. And I need to show up in every element of life in a way that brings God into that conscious experience. So it's not to say that everybody should hang out on the couch as a means to living life. In that context, in the example that I gave, the truth is that in that context, the woman who's pregnant sitting on the couch is okay. The story that she might be telling herself is off kilter. It's not aligned with the truth of who she is. And there are times in our lives where we're feeling disconcerted because we're not being productive. A workaholic, for example, right? They're searching to make value of themselves through the work. But it's Sunday. It's a day off. Relax. Be present. It's Shabbos. Chill out. You say, no, I got to be doing something. No, you're okay in this moment. And I'm also okay when I try to do a mitzvah and it doesn't actually work out, or I want to do a good deed, or something is not right in my world. A relationship is not right, work is not right, health is not right, and we start falling apart. Why are we falling apart? Why do we get so triggered from stuff? It's not because our soul is aligned in that moment. It's because all the other stuff is misaligned. And there's stories that we tell ourselves about what's going on. If we truly connected with that inner dimension of who we are, no matter what's going on with us and around us, we would be okay, whether it's an action or an inaction that's taking place. So the commandments, the mitzvahs, which have a lot of specificity, is God's way of saying, yes, you're okay, and I want you to connect with me, not just on an essential level, but also on this external relationship level, so that you as a human being can feel the connection. It's been said that the purpose of the mitzvah is not for God, the purpose of the mitzvah is for us. Right? God said to us, do you want to have a relationship? And we said, na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. Right? Okay. God says, you want to have a relationship with me as a human being? Here's the program. Here's the commandments. This is what it looks like. So it's really much more about us feeling connected to God, not just on an essential level. Because here's another important point. We live in a place of tension in the human experience, which is by design, by the way, right? God takes the soul that is striving for divine connection, and he places it in a body that's preoccupied with self. That's miserable. I mean, that structure is like, I mean, you ever go to the gym, and how do you gain strength? By doing something that's opposite of your comfort level. You don't want to lift those weights. And when it stops hurting, you stop growing, right? So you need to be pushed. We need to be pushed. So God says to us, on an essential level, you're always okay. By the way, it's a very important message as we enter into the high holiday season, is that oftentimes we show up carrying so much baggage. And Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur are holy days. They're not days for baggage, they're days for connection. And the connection is God says, I love you, you're okay, you're wonderful. And yes, maybe you've done some things you shouldn't have. Maybe you're carrying around stuff. Okay, let's work on that stuff. But let's not get focused on that, right? A relationship doesn't get repaired when it gets focused on all of the misdeeds. Relationships get repaired when you go back to the core of the relationship. What is this relationship all about? A good therapist, when a couple comes in and they're struggling in their relationship, the therapist challenges them to contemplate what brought you two together in the first place. Why does the therapist do that? Because when we can realize what our inherent connection is, when we're able to recognize that, then naturally the other stuff gets corrected. Then we want to correct it. Then we're willing to put the self-interest aside for the sake of the relationship. So keeping kosher, to your example. Yes, it's challenging, it's difficult, it's very nuanced. But if it's not about me and my interest, but it's about my essence, it's about my relationship with God, okay, I'll go the extra mile. I'll do the things that are necessary. And I'm not doing them because I feel pressured by them, but I actually feel liberated. I feel connected to God through them. I mean, as a mother, you know that truth with your children, right? When you're feeling connected, everything is great. You're going to do all the things. You're going to show up as the best mother. When you're feeling disconnected, and usually it's feeling disconnected from self, right? Then it's a much more difficult challenge to be able to show up fully. But the compassion we need to have on ourselves is the real tension that exists within us, that we are both body and soul, and we live in that tension. Make sense? Please, yeah.
Because we don't follow it, we're not following him, and we're bad Jews or whatever. It's more his rules are to get us to feel some discomfort, to do things that are challenging to us, so that we rewire our brains in a sense that might be more spiritual or closer to God. Because if just eating and not thinking about it, you don't gain anything from that. But when you stop and you're more conscious and aware of like certain rules or things that are more challenging, you're strengthening yourself spiritually, emotionally.
Beautiful. Yeah. The word for mitzvah, the Hebrew word mitzvah. Good morning. The Hebrew word mitzvah in Aramaic means to connect. So a mitzvah is an opportunity for connection. And I'm glad you brought this up, because it's very timely as we enter into the high holiday season. You know, all the humor, all the jokes about Jewish guilt and mothers guilting their children and stuff like that. I mean, there's a culture around that, no question. And the objective of Hasidic philosophy, the objective of Jewish mysticism, was to do away with that. It's not what God is all about. It's not what we're all about. It's unfortunate that we have a relationship to the commandments in that way. My father told me a story when he was a yeshiva student in the 60s. There was a secular Israeli who came to Brooklyn, and he was very open-minded, like authentically open-minded, and he wanted to explore this world. He grew up in a kibbutz and with all of the secular mindset of modern Zionism. And he said, like, if I'm truly an open-thinking person, I should check out what religious life is like before I discount it. So he committed to coming to Brooklyn, enrolling in the yeshiva for 6 months, living like a regular observant Jew, and he said, at the end of the 6 months, I'm going to decide if this is for me or not. So he spent 6 months, and lo and behold, he decided it's for him. But he was a smart guy. And he came to the Rebbe and he said, I know that if I take on everything, if I suddenly become a fully observant Jew, I'm going to crash. So what should I do? How should I approach this? So the Rebbe told him, do everything that you're comfortable with and one thing that you're uncomfortable with. And when that thing that you're uncomfortable with, you become comfortable, take on the next thing that you're uncomfortable with. That's the process. Because the objective is to the human experience. This is, I mean, you don't have to be Jewish for this. You don't have to follow the Torah for this. But what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean for any human being to be alive? It means that we're challenging ourselves to grow, right? You see a flower growing. As long as the flower is growing, it's alive. When it stops growing, it's a good indication that it's dead, right? So as long as we're challenging ourselves, as long as we're growing, we're alive. Not only are we alive, we feel alive. We feel that we have purpose in this world because we're growing. We're doing something. We're moving forward. We're not becoming stagnant. People who retire and don't have anything to do decline because human beings need to be productive. As a Jew, that growth needs to be in our relationship with God, showing up in the world, making the world a better place, making the world a more godly place. So we have to constantly be pushing that envelope. But it's not about, it shouldn't be laden with any kind of guilt. God is not, I heard this once from a rabbi. He said, we think about God in this ominous way. So imagine your kid, is disrespectful to you. And you say, that was terrible. You take out a baseball bat and you whack them in the head. Right? I see your eyes are bulging. It's like you say, you're crazy? If you think about the notion that we have around this ominous perspective about God, it's the same thing. Oh, I didn't keep kosher, so therefore what? You're making my business fail? That's basically God taking a baseball bat and saying, you didn't keep kosher, so I'm going to whack you in the head. It doesn't work that way. God loves us. It's an opportunity for us to connect with God. Yes, there are rules and there are guidelines and stuff like that, but it's not there to make our lives miserable. It's there to make us connected and to help us grow. That's the opportunity. Any other questions? Okay, let's start chapter 4. There's 1 or 2 more copies if anybody would like up here. Page 28. So the verse tells us that in the Messianic era, Umala Arz Deas Hashem, that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. And as we discussed before, the idea of knowledge of God is the idea that the higher dimension of divine consciousness becomes so familiar to us that we call it knowing, right? When we know ourselves in a way that's not intellectual, or it's beyond intellect. I don't have to explain that I'm alive. I know I'm alive. If I have to start explaining that I'm alive, we're in trouble. I know I'm alive. I know the sun is shining. I know the coffee tastes good. It doesn't require an intellectual, philosophical analysis. The things that are more difficult, the things that are more distant, I have to work on knowing. I have to process them. And as we mentioned, there are 2 dimensions to our relationship with God. There's the dimension of our relationship with God, which is naturally knowing, right? With a little bit of effort, we look around and we see a beautiful world and we see trees and the galaxies and the mountains and all the beautiful nature around us. We see the human body and we recognize, yeah, there's a creator, there's a mastermind, there's a director to this program. But then there's the dimension of God that we don't see. That's beyond, it's transcendent. That dimension of God requires that we work toward that. So in its initial state, it's what we call faith. Faith is the not knowing. I have to believe in that which I don't know. When I know something, I don't have to believe in it. So so this dimension of faith, this dimension of God that lives in the realm of faith, good morning, that in the Messianic era, that will become like knowledge for us. That will become like knowledge for us. So the way the verse states it is, and the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God like the water covers the sea. And as we mentioned, through this dimension of milk and honey, through growing our emotional characteristics, through channeling our pleasure, through a greater divine consciousness, we connect more deeply with God. And when we connect more deeply with God, we bring that higher dimension of faith into a space of knowledge. Did that make sense? Should I say it again? We got it? Yes? Okay. So he says that this level of milk and honey still does not reach, we do not reach that, the full impact of that experience of knowing until the Messianic era. the tension that we spoke about that exists within us, no matter how much we're going to get in touch with our soul, we're always going to have that tension. Because by definition, we are a finite being. And finite beings cannot incorporate transcendence in a perpetual state. We can't. It's just a conflict in terms. In the finite, to have the infinite just doesn't work. The very fact that the soul lives in the body is miraculous, it's paradoxical, and it's where the tension comes from. There's a tension because they're not designed to work together. So it is a miracle. We say it in the morning prayers every day, that God, the soul that you placed inside of me, it's pure, and you keep it inside of me. It's God's miracle that allows for the soul to even remain in the body. But to bring a perpetual state of transcendent consciousness into our being is not possible. There's a world of therapy. I don't know if anybody's heard it, called internal family systems. Anybody familiar with it? Anybody? No? A little bit? It goes by its acronym, IFS. It's very, very popular right now. And it's very much aligned with Torah thinking. So the essential idea is this. Look, I mean, all therapy all good therapy is a version of, it's a different facet of the same core ideas, but it's the language and the approach that really has an impact. So internal family systems, which sounds like, how do I deal with my mother and my father, my brother, my sister? It's not about that. It's this internal family. There's a family that lives inside of me. So there's the self, which we will call the soul, right? There's the self-conscious that is beyond all of the triggers and the traumas and all that stuff. And then there are what we call parts. So when your husband or your wife says something to you and you get triggered, that's a part of you that's reacting to something. And why does that part react? It could be genetics. It could be some story that you have from childhood. It could be something that happened yesterday. So that part reacts, and this protector shows up. So let's say that part is anger. So let's say that part is anger. So the protector comes along and says to you, I'm going to take care of this. You don't have to have you don't have to worry about this. I got this. And the protector tells the person, you're a lowlife, you're an idiot, throws some darts at the other person to get them to back off. And this lives not just in relationships, it lives within our own struggles, our own triggers that might live within ourselves, our addictions, our obsessions. All of that is a form of that. How do you recover from that? Or how do you live with more equilibrium? The more you get in touch with self, this is language from IFS, it's not from Torah. The more you get in touch with self, so when the spouse or the circumstance triggers you, instead of the protector coming out to go to battle for you, you go to self. You go to your core essence. And you say, I'm okay. I'm okay. Yes, I see you part. I see that you're getting worked up. But I need you to know that we're okay. I'm okay. Because I'm okay, you're okay. Not unlike a child who's throwing a tantrum because you didn't give them the candy. And so the protector comes along and says, well, give them the candy so they'll stop screaming, right? But the healthy thing is to say, you're okay. It's okay that you want a candy and that you're not going to get a candy right before bedtime. I'm going to give you a hug. I'm going to tell you that you're okay. And eventually, the child will calm down. I remember our youngest are twins. And they're now almost 14. But when they were babies, maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, my wife bought them pajamas. And one twin wanted one, and one twin wanted the other pajama, different design, which, by the way, a good rule for twins, is get them the same thing. And the one who didn't get what they wanted, like literally collapsed. She was crying. It was like you would have thought somebody died. And it wasn't specifically IFS that I had learned about them, but it was some other mode of parenting. And I did the hard thing, and I got into bed with her and I held her. And she must have cried for 20 minutes, like as if the world was coming to an end. And any parent has experienced this in some form. And then at one point she just like let go and she stopped crying. What happened? At a certain point, I mean, either she probably just got too tired of the crying, but at a certain point, the parent embrace, the connection to the parent lets the child know, okay, it's not the end of the world. You're going to be okay. You didn't get the pajamas that you want, but you're going to be okay. We didn't solve the problem, but we went to the essence of the person and said, you're okay. You really are okay. So when we can do that within ourselves to create a pause between the trigger, doesn't mean the triggers aren't going to come, but we can create a pause between the triggers and the response. Like Viktor Frankl says, right? The choice lives between the stimuli and response, right? We just need to create a little bit of a window there, enough to tell ourselves, stop. Am I okay? Is the I okay? Is the self okay? Yes, the self is okay. If we can just tap into that for a second, we know the self is okay, then we can already start navigating all the triggers without the protectors coming in and go to war. Sometimes we recognize the trigger's got nothing to do with that person. They're just the catalyst for it, but it's my own story that I'm carrying around that's making me react in a certain way. But it's not their fault. So instead of blaming them, which is, we may have been obsessed with blaming them for years and never really getting to the core of the issue. And then we went to therapy and the therapist said, oh, you have this trigger because your mother did this, your father did that. And we got stuck on that, trying to figure out, like, how do I rewrite my story? How do I rewrite the story so I don't get the trigger? No, you're going to get the trigger, but give the trigger a hug. But the only way you can give the trigger a hug is if you are coming from a place of self and you have compassion on that part. The reason why I'm telling you this is because you may never lose the trigger. It's a hard pill to swallow, but you may never lose the trigger. Because some of these stories are now part of our neural pathways, and sometimes we can rewrite them, but a lot of times we can't. And they'll always be there. They won't be as intense, but we can always manage them from a place of self. The parallel is that in our higher dimension relationship with God, we always have the ability to tap into that faith. But we don't always have the ability to integrate it like we do at the level of knowledge. In other words, it is always possible for us to develop a profound relationship to God's presence in the world around us. We always have that ability. If we just choose to stop, we can look at the tree. You can look at this tree for 20 minutes and have amazing spiritual experience. You don't have to hug the tree, but you look at a tree and you start thinking about the fascination of how this tree came to be and how it grows and how it gets nurtured from the sun and the night and the water and everything in life. Every single dimension of the physical world around us, from that which is in our present consciousness to that which is deep in the sea and high in the galaxies. If we just take some time, we can incorporate a relationship with God at the level of knowledge. We can feel so connected to God in those experiences that it's very real for us. The higher dimension of God is not as easily accessible. We always have the ability to tune into it, and it becomes enhanced, as we've been discussing, through fulfilling God's commandments and through studying Torah. We open up those channels. It makes it easier for us because we create the divine energy is more present in our consciousness. But what the Rebbe is telling us here is that we will, until the Messianic era, we're always going to have that tension because we can't bring the transcendent dimension into our finite body. We can't. It's just paradoxical. So we always have enough access to get ourselves anchored. But until the Messianic era, we won't be able to create that transformation where we're in a perpetual state of knowing this higher dimension of God. Yes. No, don't sorry. This is good. I like when there are questions.
Cheating or looking at the tree, like not when we're in this higher trigger, like with our kids melting down where the stimulus and the response are right next to each other. There's not that pause. Like I get that we have to create this pause and come to the self, but God, that's so hard to do in the moment, in those heated moments, right? And so how do you even get to extend the pause? And are you saying that by the behaviors we do when we're not triggered or just throughout the day, appreciating the beauty in the physical world of God, that's how we can then extend?
Yes, yes,
Get better.
yes, yes. I'm sorry?
Helps you practice creating that space.
Yes. So what is it that allows you to pause? In your own experience, what is it that allows you to pause? What are you experiencing? I mean, think about times where your kids were all over the place and driving you crazy. You were having a rough day every day, and you actually paused. What was going on for you in that moment? Why did you pause?
Maybe I started to feel a sensation building up in my body, and I did notice that, and I paused.
Okay.
And I maybe thinking about the kid.
And what? What were you thinking about? I mean, imagine what it might have been. No, but what helped you pause? What helped you pause and not react? I want to challenge you to think about what you've had moments where the kids were driving you crazy and you didn't react from a place of frustration, but you actually were anchored. What might you have told yourself to stay anchored?
Thinking about where this meltdown is.
So what part of you is responding to that? What part of you is having that conversation? Yes, but it's more profound than that. It's your love, it's your essence that loves your children, because the other person's children, you're not going to necessarily have that conversation in your head. You're going to say, get these kids out of here. But your own kids, you love them and you feel connected to them. So when all that turmoil is going on and you're able to get to that place of self, you're able to say, okay, they are driving me crazy. My body's triggered. I'm getting this frustration, but they're just 6. They're just little kids, and I gotta try to show up. The reason why I'm making this point is that the more we get in touch with self, the more we're in touch with the soul, the easier it is for us to move from the trigger to the self. And the powerful thing is, as soon as we move to the self, the problem is solved. It literally takes a second, but we need to cultivate the self. And that's where thinking about the tree and recognizing that God is present inside of me, God is present around me, and that everything is part of a master plan. That consciousness, the more work we put into that, the more we get in touch with self. And the more we get in touch with that essence of who we are, the more anchored we are, and the stuff that's happening doesn't rattle us the same way. I'm going to give you another kind of windy example. We actually were studying this yesterday. So talk about sin coming into the high holiday season. So my uncle, may he be well and live long, has a button, or he had a button. It said, everybody stops smoking sooner or later. So, and then there's some other jokes around, I've stopped smoking 1,000 times, right? So if you've ever smoked, you know that it's hard to stop smoking. And so what pushes a person to stop smoking? Their spouse tells them it stinks. They read something see something on the news, or they read something about, the seriousness of smoking, and they say, I'm stopping to smoke. And they do for a day, a week, a month, and then they start again. If you want to stop smoking, it's not about stopping to smoke. If you want to stop smoking, you have to value life. You have to value health. That shift will cause a person to stop smoking. So what happens? Every year comes into the high holiday season, and talking about the baggage, right? We show up and we say, why am I here again? I said a bunch of things that I wasn't going to do this year, I was going to do, and then here I am again. I'm right back into the same place. And the issue is that what we do every year is we get fixated on the do's and the don'ts. Oh, I'm going to become a better person. I'm going to start exercising every day. I'm going to start eating healthy. I'm going to start saying good morning to everyone. That's the wrong thing. That's the wrong focus. It's about the relationship. If I come to a place where I say, I want to have a relationship with God, I want to be alive, I want to fulfill my purpose on this earth, that's what I want, and I'm in touch with that, then naturally, the things that need to change in my life are going to change. Change is not this big event that takes place. Change is subtle. So there's an interesting, in the Torah, we have instruction regarding bringing sacrifices for sins that one commits. And amongst the sacrifices, one brings a sin offering for sins that were done inadvertently. And the question is, why do you have to bring a sin offering for something you did inadvertently? It wasn't on purpose, right? Another kid scenario. One kid by mistake bumps into the other kid and hurts them, and the parent, the teacher says, say sorry to your brother. And the child says, but I didn't do it on purpose. Why do I have to say I'm sorry? I didn't do it on purpose. You've heard that. And it's like indignant. I didn't do it on purpose. I'm not going to say I'm sorry. If I did it on purpose, I need to say I'm sorry, but I didn't do it on purpose. It's a good question. The 6-year-old is saying, I didn't do it on purpose, and they're a lawyer and everything, and we have to take their claim into consideration. Why do they have to say they're sorry? They didn't do it on purpose. The answer is because you were too preoccupied with self. If you weren't so preoccupied with self, you wouldn't hurt that person inadvertently. It's okay. The human condition is that we are sometimes preoccupied with self. But I wouldn't bump into that person and knock them into the wall if I was truly aware of them, if I wasn't preoccupied with self. So spiritually, if we are in a state of consciousness of our relationship with God, we don't sin and we do the right things. Again, I'm qualifying this because I don't want you to walk out of here with a different type of guilt. It's okay. That's the human condition. We live in this tension, but we have to recognize that the work that we can put in is in bringing a greater God consciousness into our being. You can't say, oh, well, I got triggered and therefore I'm justified in shooting my mouth off at you. No. Yes, I get that you're triggered and I have a lot of compassion for your trigger, but what are you doing about it? What are you doing about your trigger? And the ideal thing is to go and say, you know what? I'm okay. Because God is in my story. And if God is in my story, then I don't have to react just because a part of me is getting triggered. I can have compassion on that part. How do we come to sin inadvertently? Because we've been so preoccupied with self that we become desensitized to the consciousness of God. It doesn't even have to be sin. It's just a preoccupation with self. If you're ever in a really bad mood, like you just can't shake it, it happens sometimes. Solution, go to an old age home. Go to a hospital. Go give some food to a homeless person. Do something that you have absolutely no personal benefit from. Do something selfless. Why? Because the reason you're in such a bad mood is because you're caught up in yourself. You're ruminating on me and my bad mood and how bad of a mood I'm in and why I'm in a bad mood. And then you judge yourself for being in a bad mood. And this whole thing just festers and feeds on itself. So get out of yourself. Get out of your head. Go and do something for someone else. And by virtue of doing that, the self the true self becomes manifest. And then you shake the preoccupation with self. So if we want to become sensitized to the self, if we want to become more aware of self, it does happen through meditating on the tree and meditating on nature and meditating on the blessings in our lives and meditating on the gift of the godliness that's within me. It doesn't happen overnight, but if we put the effort in and we slowly nurture that, we become sensitized. I've shared this many times here. We're sitting in Jeff's place, which is a place of recovery. There are 12-step meetings and so on. People who are in recovery, there's a dry drunk and there's people in recovery. A dry drunk is somebody who disciplines themselves not to engage in the addiction, but that's not called recovery. So it's good because they're not dying from the drug or the alcohol, but that's not called recovery. Recovery is an inner process. And in recovery, anybody who's in recovery will tell you that they have a spiritual practice. Speak to anybody in the 12-step program will tell you they have a spiritual practice. What is a spiritual practice? So I think there's like 5 fundamental things. There's daily meditation, daily prayer, there's daily phone calls, attending meetings. I don't know all the specifics, but the idea is that every day the person in recovery is invested in their recovery. They're invested in maintaining a consciousness of why they got into this in the first place. They're invested in building a relationship with a higher power. And if you do that, and people who relapse oftentimes will tell you that they stop doing their daily spiritual practices. And what happens? You become desensitized again. When you become desensitized, you become susceptible because you're being preoccupied with self. If you nurture the triggers, you're going to keep on getting triggered. If you focus only on the trigger, you're going to keep on getting triggered. If you focus on where I've fallen short, that is not a godly expression. I've fallen short is a selfish expression. I feel bad that I'm smelled from smoke. I feel bad that I came last year and told God that I wasn't going to do these things, or I made a resolution that I was going to do these things differently, and here I am again. Because you were focused on self. You weren't focused on your essence. So it's a process. It's a process, constantly working on the self, working on nurturing that. We don't spend time thinking about self. We don't. It's not the human experience. We spend time thinking about our parts. We think about the triggers. That's where we live. We live in our head. We live in our head. We're not living in the truest self of who we are. Think about the thoughts that we think about all day. It's technical. It's self-judgmental. It's judgmental of others. We're not spending the time in the self. And you have to invest time in it. Yes. Prayer, meditation is a first and most powerful thing. We have a daily prayer that we start the day with. It's a short prayer, Moda Ani, which I give thanks I give thanks before you, living and eternal King, that you have restored my soul inside of me. Great is your trust. So as soon as you wake up in the morning, even before you get out of bed, even though our first natural thought is selfish or self-centered, right? Oh my gosh, what do I have to do today? I got to go to the bathroom, all these thoughts that immediately come into the mind. We shift and we say, okay, I'm going to do this practice. I'm going to give thanks to God for restoring my soul inside of me. Oh, there's a soul. There's a purpose. There's something more. When you sit down to drink a cup of coffee, you take a moment to say, the coffee is going to bring me pleasure. But where does this come from? And we say a blessing. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, that everything was created by your word. Take a moment to say the morning Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. What does that mean, the Lord is one? As we've been studying, the Lord is one means that in all the fragmentation of the world, God's present in all of it. And then doing an act of kindness, giving some charity, thinking about others. All of these things help us get in touch, bring out within ourselves the consciousness of self. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But the more we nurture it, the more so last night, the tradition is that the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, or 2 Saturday nights before, if Rosh Hashanah is like this year on a Monday night, we begin the Sephardic Jews actually begin at the beginning of this Hebrew month. Today's the 21st day of the month of Elul. Sephardic Jews begin at the beginning of the month. They get up every morning early and recite these prayers in preparation for the new year. The Ashkenazic tradition is we begin the Saturday night before, as we mentioned. So, but midnight, proper midnight now is about 1:30. And we don't want to interfere with the holiness of Shabbat by, so to speak, marring it with prayers of atonement and forgiveness and so on. So we wait until 1:30 to begin these prayers. And in the Chabad tradition, you don't go into this solemn prayer without first getting together, singing some songs, saying a little l'chaim, lifting the spirits. And then, so we got together yesterday at 11:30, last night, less than 12 hours ago. And then at 1:30, we said the prayers. It lasts for about 45 minutes. And then hopefully we get some sleep. The whole focus of the preparation for the prayer is to move away from the preoccupation with self. It's very easy when you get into the place of atonement. A whole Yom Kippur, I have sinned, I have committed this and that. It's very, very easy to get stuck in the mud. And getting together and having this, singing these songs and talking about our relationship with God, it sensitizes us. It brings us back into that place of a consciousness. And it's those kind of practices that we do on a regular basis that helps us bring God into our consciousness. By the way, it's not just within ourselves, it's also how we relate to the world, right? It is about the tree, it is about the nature, it is about the encounter with the other person, right? And this is the fascinating thing. The more you get in touch with the godliness within yourself, the more when you encounter someone who's irritating you, you actually shift from judgment to compassion, because you begin to look at them not on the surface. You begin to look at them on a self level as well. Yeah. For sure. But the difference is, and we have this also today with a lot of the youth, where they're cutting off ties with their parents, and it's all about the blame of the parents. It's not compassion for the parents, it's blame of the parents. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't parents who, even with their adult children, still continue to perpetuate this negative behavior. But oftentimes, it's just human beings who've done their best raising their children. Every generation tries to do their best, and we're going to screw up. That's just the nature of things. But the child that cuts off the parent is preoccupied with self. They're not preoccupied with compassion. So yes, there are times, absolutely, where we have to say, this is a person who objectively is harmful to me. They're so not well that they just create havoc around them. But that also can come from a place of compassion, not from a place of judgment. So the more we're in touch with self, the more we truly are in touch with ourself, even if it's just in the moment where we pause to contemplate what's going on here. Why is this person, what's going on with that person? And we say, you know what? I'm okay. I'm coming from a place of compassion, and I see that they're so locked inside themselves that their behavior is really unhealthy, and I need to separate myself from that. That happens very infrequently when it's that extreme. Most of the time, it's my inability to truly have compassion for the other that actually allows for the toxicity to come into my world. There's very healthy ways to create separation that don't have to be building walls around ourselves or building walls in front of others. But it does happen. And one, a good friend will help you get perspective, whether this is coming from a self-interest place or truly a compassionate place. But when it is, it's an appropriate thing. Okay, I got to stop. We'll be back next week. Same time, same station.